Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Oh my goodness, week 3, done and dusted. Very excited to share with you a couple of little updates and some progress for this week. So things have still been kind of cruising along. Now, nothing has been perfect, that is for sure. And I think one of the common mistakes that I see with so many people that are trying to undertake a goal, whether it is something to do with their health and fitness or whether it's a financial related goal or any goal, is that there is this expectation that things are going to go perfectly. And that is such the wrong attitude to take, I think, when you're undertaking something that is really, really challenging. So I've certainly been looking at this as I would approach any goal that I have. And I know that there are going to be some hurdles, some obstacles, but I think the most important thing is that, you're consistent with your efforts and the actions that you take to get there. So, this past week, I had a couple of little road bumps or hurdles again. But I know that I've kind of been progressively getting through them, and each week I can see myself doing better. And the results are starting to be a little bit more visible, which is awesome. So I guess to kind of take you back through the week, I guess I'll start with my training. So we are now week 3, or I've just completed week 3 of the Ms Bikini Olympia program. And guys, if you're wanting to participate in that, all you need to do is be part of our, coaching team. So you can work with myself. You can also work with our coaching staff. And then as soon as our app becomes available, which we're still waiting on the App Store, I am so frustrated, or another story, but it will be available for everybody to use as well. So week 3 done and dusted. What's interesting is that this week, and you'll see when we take a look at my data, that it looks like on paper, my training volume dropped off a little bit, but it didn't actually drop off in the sense that I was training at a lower intensity or, my load selection suddenly went down. It was the differences of training between different gyms and different equipment. So, certain gyms, plates might be loaded a certain way, and maybe the movement pattern is a little bit different, or the overall load of the machine is different. And subsequently this week, it looks like I went down by about 10,000 pounds. But I know that I was just alternating between equipment. I was still putting in a lot of effort. My exertion was really high. And in fact, this week, I was surprised to see that my overall training caloric expenditure estimates were in fact a little bit higher. And across the total week, generally a little bit higher too. So each week I've kind of been making some progress. Although what's really interesting is that the scale does not reflect it. So I'll show you some of my weigh-in data this week. Now, granted, a couple of the days weigh-ins earlier in the week. So on Monday, Tuesday, and maybe even Wednesday, my weight was still being artificially kind of elevated because I was still on my cycle. So a couple of those days are going to be skewing my true weight a little bit positive. But then you can kind of see it starts to trend back down. But I'm still not as low as I have been in some of those initial weeks. So you might be wondering yourself, if you're going through a fat loss, phase outside of your menstrual cycle, why else might my weight not be moving? I feel like I'm doing all of the things right. I've reduced my calories. I've upped my training. I'm moving my body more. Why isn't the scale showing it? And one of the things that was noticeably more apparent this week was my muscle soreness. So at the beginning of the week, it was kind of normal. I didn't have any excessive soreness. But as the week went on, I guess as I started to do a little bit more of my high intensity cardio on my spin bike, and as I kind of got through the training block, I could just feel that soreness growing. And I think by yesterday, Sunday, I remember I was just sitting around, not doing a whole lot of much. In fact, I was doing meal prep for several hours. And then I can't remember what else I was doing, but I just remember being really sore, just to kind of move up and down, bend down to do some laundry, bend over to fold the sheets or whatever. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so sore. So with that increased muscle soreness, and this is the most sore I have been in a long time, I have to be wary that that soreness is going to result in some amount of acute inflammatory response and swelling. So I'm definitely holding on to a little bit more water this week, and that is likely why I haven't seen my weight kind of drop back down. And there's a very good chance that if I keep pushing it in the gym and I have to keep taking up, my training in efforts to keep making progress, that I might not see a drop off in that total body water. It's very likely that it might just kind of continue to elevate. So all the while I'm getting leaner visibly, looking in the mirror, I know it. I can see abs that I haven't seen before in at least like 18 months. And I'm getting leaner. I can tell just by looking at my physique that things are starting to change. But it might not necessarily reflect the way that I was anticipating when I look at all of my forecasting. So when we open up my spreadsheets, I'll show you the summary or the forecasting sheet and how that it tells you where you should be at each individual week as we kind of progress through the fat loss phase. Obviously, I'm targeting a weekly rate of weight loss of about 0.6% of my total body weight every week. And that kind of amounts to, I think, coincidentally, about 0.6 of a pound. Could even be more, actually. I'll have a look here in a minute. But I'm not trending on that nice line. So I'm trying not to get, bothered by that, and just recognize that because I've really ramped up my training in general, from both cardiovascular exercise, the HIIT especially, that's something that I kind of was doing spontaneously, throughout the last 12 months, but not consistently. Now that I am having that, 60 minutes of pretty hard Peloton bike rides, that's not something that my body's accustomed to. So I can feel it the next day when I get off after having done a high intensity session. In fact, if we look at my individual training zones, when I'm doing that, I am in zone 4 and 5 for most of the 30 minutes that I'm exercising. So my average heart rate sits right at about 167 to 170 beats per minute. I am going really hard. It's definitely not something that, when you describe, what's zone 2 training, what's zone 3 training, where you could potentially still have a conversation with somebody. Granted, when I go for my walks in the mornings, I can absolutely do that. That's nice and easy. My heart rate probably sits at 115 to 120 beats per minute at most. This training, because I am short on time and I want to get a lot of caloric expenditure, a lot of energy burn in a short period of time, I have to go a whole lot harder. So all of this is so new. So if you're doing something similar, just keep in mind that initially you might have a big drop off on the scale like I did. But then even though you're still losing body fat and you are clearly in a deficit, that increased training intensity is kind of, masking it the whole time. So that's kind of how my training went for this week. And I'll show you some of the individual numbers here in a second. But nutrition, let's talk about that. So as I begrudgingly said at the beginning, it has been 18 months of bliss not tracking. And I must say, I thought that I would have, by week 3, am I feeling a little bit more comfortable about it? No, it's just solidified the fact that I can't stand tracking macros. I feel like it is such a deterrent. It pulls away from my quality of life, or at least it does for me. I think one of the things that, I've kind of made a concerted effort to improve on in my personal life over the last 18 months is kind of getting back to grounded presence, being, present and available and opening conversations when I'm with people. And I have just found, having had that beautiful experience of learning how to listen to my own appetite regulating hormones and those hunger cues, and being able to maintain at just a healthy body weight, going this little bit extra for competition and having to start back, some of those more accurate methods of tracking, which we know flexible dieting is the most accurate way to do things. So naturally, I'm going to do it. But it has really been eye-opening over the last couple of weeks just to see how much time that was taking away from my quality of life and my ability to be present and engaged. And also it was, I feel like it was taking away from like my happiness. So this past week or so, when I am still trying to be, social and presently engaged in conversation, the tracking macros component has definitely been really, really challenging. And one of the things that I want to identify, I think, as a struggle for me this past week is not necessarily having foods pre-portioned and ready to go. So I think in week 1, my goal was to get back into preparing some foods in bulk ahead of time. So that was great. I pulled out some recipes that I knew would be very macro friendly. I've got all of my books to go back to, which I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad that I have all of that, history to kind of draw from, because I'd had a wonderful time, not really, thinking too much about my nutrition. So I was grateful for having those recipes. But what I was doing was preparing them in bulk and then just putting them into like a big container in the refrigerator. And then some of them had like a protein component, and then the sauce was separate. So in the case of like the meatballs that I was making, so I was doing like turkey meatballs, beef, cream cheese stuffed beef meatballs, those types of things, they weren't already portioned out. So what I found, I guess, last week was that it was very helpful to have all of that stuff there, because I didn't want to have to be making a hot meal or preparing something when I've got a busy work day, obviously. It was really frustrating when I had to kind of weigh out and portion out, the individual meatballs. And then I was still having to weigh out like the sauce component and then the Parmesan cheese that I might put on top, or if I was putting a spaghetti or a zucchini noodle or something with it. It was kind of all individual elements. And I still found that there was a lot of tracking involved. So that being said, this week, so Sunday yesterday, I had a big meal prep day where I prepared a bunch of things again. Hated it. Guys, I just miss having that one day to just do nothing or like get caught up on things around the house. Like, Sundays, ladies, it's like do all of the laundry that you didn't get to do during the week. Maybe order your groceries, tidy up the house, because by the end of the week when the whirlwind has been through, it's like, okay, let's at least start the week fresh so that my mind is clear. I'm in a good space. My environment is as nice as it's going to be. Get the cats sorted, get their food ordered. And then obviously if you've got children, it's like you've got to start the week, prepare for school lunches, activities, what have you got going on? Like there's just a lot to manage, right? So I set myself up well, but this time I took it the step further and I was like, okay, I don't want to have to do anything other than take that food out of the refrigerator, heat it up, and done. So I portioned everything out this week. So I'm back to having individual containers. I know approximately what I want to have as the caloric content for each of my meals. So for me, with my calories right now at about 1450, give or take, I want to have meals around 400 calories, okay? So I have portioned everything out so that I've got about 30 to 35 grams of protein, and then somewhere between 30 and 40 grams of carbohydrate, 10 to 15 grams of fats, depending on the meal. So this week I've got everything done. So here is the menu for this week. I did do my meatballs again. So the cream cheese stuffed meatballs using the 99% fat-free 96% fat-free beef and the light Laughing Cow cheese wedges. And I'm going to give you my entire grocery list for all of the recipes that I did this week in case you want to have a go at some of these as well, because they were so easy. Very tasty. Obviously, now I'm even going that step further and portioning them out. So I'll give you all of that stuff and it will be linked in the description below. So that was one of the dishes. I also really loved the chicken korma brand that I tried, the simmer sauce from a few weeks ago. So I brought that back in. So that's chicken, zucchini, yellow squash, and then just the chicken korma sauce. And then, if I want to have some carbohydrate with that, Then I've got my rice. So I use like a basmati rice, 90 seconds, it's done. What else did I make? I feel like I made a lot of things. Something else yellow. And the last recipe that I did was a honey mustard chicken. I guess it was technically a dipping sauce, and it's by G. Hughes. But I'm going to use it as like the actual stir fry sauce. So those are the three mains that I've got. And then I've also been really enjoying making homemade pizzas. So again, for the pizza base, I was using the carb wraps that I used last week. And then I did a bunch of pulled pork and pulled chicken. So I'm going to do the same again this week. And then I add my like mixed peppers, tomato, fat-free cheese. And that's super simple. And that's something that I would do for dinner so that it's not kind of distracting me too much during the middle of the day. And obviously, if you don't work from home, that's not even an option unless you took it in cold and then you would reheat it, in the staff microwave or something like that. But that's what I've been doing for dinners. And then weekends, I am still trying to make that concerted effort to be social and to get out of my four walls because it is very easy to get just very comfortable in your home space. And I know for my mental health, it's important that I get out and be part of the community. So this past weekend, I really enjoyed going to Kato, which is a modern Asian fusion restaurant here in Fort Lauderdale. Again, it's like walking distance from my house. I'm so grateful and so lucky to have something and so many restaurants that are so close by. So we had like a smorgasbord of all the things. And you'll see when I go and look at my tracking here in a second that my numbers were all over the place. So let's bounce over there, take a look at my numbers, and I can talk you through that meal and I'll show you what we were eating. Oh my God, it was amazing. And then I'll talk a little bit how I track that as well. Okay, guys, so I was just telling you about my, Friday date night at Takato, which was the Asian fusion restaurant. And I'm going to put some of the pictures up here for you now so that you can see this restaurant. It is really cool. I honestly haven't been there in a little while because there are just so many places along the water that I love. And I think because I just started prep, I kind of gravitated away from Asian food a little bit. And the reason for that is, number one, I love sushi. So obviously there's a lot of rice. And if I'm to eat to my true satisfaction, I'd probably end up exceeding my caloric goals like pretty significantly, especially if I want to be able to have a cocktail and enjoy something like that that's fun. Whereas if I go to like a more American style of restaurant or a steakhouse, I'm able to get, a lot more protein, and I'll order usually like prawns and ahi tuna, like a sashimi style dish. And then I have my steak, so I can get a huge amount of protein, and I don't necessarily have to have a whole lot of accompaniments with that, and I still really enjoy it. So I might do, a side salad or a Cobb salad or wedge salad or some kind of, veggie side if there's something on the menu that takes my fancy. So that's kind of why I had steered away from Asian foods a little bit. But I also, wanted to recognize and appreciate my past experiences in prep, and kind of still going out and enjoying myself, but never really feeling truly satisfied. So this time around, I want to make sure that I do honor that. I've allowed myself a little bit of extra time in this prep to make sure that I can have some slightly higher days on the weekends. So we started off at this restaurant with some really fun cocktails. I can't recall the exact names of these things. I'm sure I've got the menu written here somewhere, but you can see like these are beautiful. I had one that was I think lavender martini or something like that, lychee and lavender, which is the light colored one there, or the white one, which was so good. And then the other one was more of like a pineapple, tropical style, but it was a little bit tart. But I ordered both of those cocktails to try, and I think the way that I would track those is first and foremost, I go and look at the ingredients. So, usually there's like 1 or 2 different types of liquor. One of them is usually a straight up clear spirit, usually a vodka or a gin, whatever the base is. I might use a tequila, silver tequila sometimes. And I'll track that as 1 ounce. So like a 30 ml serving of vodka, for instance, or gin or any of those clear spirits is typically about 64 calories 64 calories. And I would usually assign that to a carbohydrate. And that's because carbohydrates have a similar thermogenic effect as alcohol. So the energy cost to break down alcohol is similar to carbohydrate. It's not similar to dietary fat, and it's not similar to protein. So carbs is kind of the most appropriate one. If I'm going to pinch from carbs or fats, I'm going to pinch from carbs because it's similar. And then I always look at what the kind of mix-in ingredients are. So in both of these cocktails, they also had like a sweet liqueur. So one of them had the lychee flavored liqueur. So it's still some alcohol, but it's also very sweet. So I assigned another 64 calories to that individual liquor. Some of it obviously is true carbohydrate and some of still alcohol. And then I had a look at what the mix-ins were. But for both of these cocktails, they had a non-calorie based, like a base. So I believe it was club soda for both of them. So, and then similar for the kind of fruity green color one that you can see on the screen. So that too had some kind of sweet melon liqueur, and then it had triple sec and something else in it. So that one actually had a little bit more calories, and I think I assigned like another 30 or 40 towards that sweet component too. So it can be a little tricky when you're trying to drink cocktails. So sometimes it's just easier to go with something that's ready to drink. It has a label. You can go, oh yeah, this whole can has 200 calories in it. All right, simply divide it by 4, and that will give you a gram base for carbohydrate, and then you slap it in. Because again, it can be really like math heavy, and that's not something that you want to have to do all the time. So I don't mind it. It's obviously been a little bit less fulfilling and enjoyable when I'm, with people and friends and I'm trying to enjoy it. But it's also not impossible. And in this particular instance, I tracked it later when I got home. I knew I was going to be over my target for the day, and I had intended on making it up over Saturday and Sunday, which I was able to do relatively successfully. So the next thing that we had were these Peking duck pork or Peking duck bao buns. These are like light and fluffy heaven. You can see there. I've got a little video and a picture of those. A little more challenging to track if you're not familiar with what's in these ingredients or what's in the recipe. Again, a great place to start is look at the ingredients listed on the menu. I've always been able to go back and find the menu online. If I didn't know exactly what it was that I ate at the time, pull apart some of the ingredients and then make an educated guess. And if you've been somebody that's enjoyed cooking, then often you'll have tried to make these things at home, which I have. So I have a little bit more of an idea about, the type of sauces. So in this case, it's a sweet, salty Asian sauce. So you could use something as simple in this particular recipe as like a teriyaki would probably have a similar macronutrient profile to the sauce that was on the duck. You could probably use, what else? Like a sweet soy glaze, something like that probably has similar macros. I think this had like a ginger chili flair, but ultimately the overall caloric density is probably really similar to a sweet soy glaze. So I just went into my tracker, found something that looked similar, was relatively high in sugar, and then assigned like a tablespoon because it wasn't a very like saucy rich. It was just what was coating the duck. The other ingredients were so dismal, I think I put in like 10 grams of mixed bell peppers because there wasn't anything in there that was heavily sauced or seasoned. It was just some fresh ingredients and not a whole lot. So that's kind of how I navigated that. And then I searched for a plain bao bun. The portion sizes that were coming up in the tracker did not look appropriate for the calories. I think when I looked at one individual small bao bun, it came up with like 13 grams of carbohydrate. Looking at that thing, like it would probably be closer to 30. So I ended up just putting in like 1.5 servings until I could get it up to the amount that I thought was more realistic. The next thing that we had was a tuna tartare. So again, that is minimal other ingredients, heavy ingredients. It's usually just the tuna, just the soy, Asian kind of dressing. Usually there's a little bit of peanut sauce or sesame oil, something like that in the sauce. So there is going to be some fat and also some sugar. So again, I just simply looked up like an Asian tuna tartare, found an ingredient for it and plugged it in based on the quantity that I think that I had. And you can see in the background there, they were also served with some wontons. So I had like one wonton, looked up a wonton, plugged it in, and that was that one. So the next thing that we had was incredible. This was like a steak katsu. So a katsu, I guess, is just any kind of fried protein. So it could be chicken, it could be pork, it could be beef. Obviously, we had steak, and this was incredible. It was a little higher in fat than the cuts of steak that I would usually choose, which are like a tenderloin or a sirloin or like a filet mignon. So definitely a little bit more fatty components on the inside, but really tasty. And I only had like 4 pieces. So again, I didn't have a food scale with me, so I just estimated that each of those little pieces were probably about 30 grams, multiplied by that by 4. And then I also just added in some of the panko breadcrumbs because that's what it's fried in. So panko breadcrumbs, some steak, I think I picked like a ribeye or something like that. And then a little bit of oil. I added like a teaspoon of oil knowing that it was fried. So that was delicious. And then the next thing that you can see here, you've probably got no idea what it is. I had no idea what it was, but we totally went out on a brunch here and we're like, okay, we'll try it. It was a special. So it was a caviar on top of tuna. And it was like the tuna belly. And I guess it was kind of emulsified down a little bit into more of like almost a spread. Like it had been, it wasn't like ahi tuna where it's kind of cubed into pieces. It was more like a dip. So dip underneath, caviar on top. And then that was served with wontons. It had some little individual sauces. And then there was like a sour cream like dip over on the side, which, you kind of layer it up, and it was served with brioche breadsticks. So again, super complicated, not something that I would be making at home, but I love trying this type of stuff. So the way that I just tracked it was, okay, I'm going to have 1.5 or 2 of the little breadsticks, the brioche sticks. So I put in 25 grams of bread, and then tuna, caviar, and then I put in some condiment extras just to kind of fill out my macros. So I think that was all we had, and I was absolutely stuffed full with 2 cocktails and 4 different starters. That was amazing. But if you want to come over and have a look at my macros on that particular day, I'll highlight it here for you. So that was on Friday. So 219 grams of carbohydrate and 54 grams of fat. And I did leave quite a few calories for going out. I think I left about 1,000, to be honest. So I ended up eating about 1,400 calories at dinner, which is my entire day. But I also knew that if I pulled back for the next 2 days over the weekend, that I would probably be able to make that fit. So that was kind of my one high day. You can see I hardly had any fiber that day because I'd only had one meal earlier in the day. And then this one was obviously pretty low in fiber. There was not a whole lot of veggies, but it's also like one day of the week. If I'm also averaging close to 30, you can see over here, this is my fiber column there. That's pretty good. So I wasn't too upset about that. Also knew I was going to weigh in real heavy after that particular day, not necessarily because I'd eaten a few hundred calories over, but more because of the sodium. So you can see here, I estimated about 4,800. It was probably higher based on how salty everything was. And then I did weigh in the next day. I was at 138.6. So it's actually funny that I came in lighter. But I think that just goes to show you, the collective 4 days of the week, hard training. I got in a double day of a double day of cardio as well. So I know that my body weight and my body fat was already trending down. So despite having that higher meal on Friday, I still came in a little lighter on Saturday morning, which was encouraging because, after seeing your weight go back up, 3 pounds when I had my cycle, it's always like, oh, you're a little bit nervous, but it's just water and I guess GI slowing as well. So overall, let's look at my compliance of the week. 98% compliance to my calories, which is great. Now, I did have a few little extra licks, bites, and tastes over the course of the weekend. And that's something that I just need to get out of that habit of. It's been something that I've done for a long time now, over the last 18 months. Haven't cared two hoots about it. But I know if I continue to have those kinds of practices, I'm not going to get to where I need to be. So 2 nights ago, I remember taking a little extra spoon of Biscoff because we'd made some low-calorie ice creams as part of my meal prep. That was a habit, just little bite before you put it back in the cupboard. I need to stop that, and I will do that this week. If I want to have it, I'll make sure that I plan it and put it into, one of my snacks or something. Did the same thing with peanut butter the other night as well. I was making a peanut satay sauce. Love this flavor of this peanut butter. It's the only one that I can eat that doesn't taste like pepper. It's so weird. After COVID, my taste buds went really weird and I couldn't eat peanut butter. Everything tasted like pepper. It's the weirdest. So I found this one brand recently when we were doing our last recipe guide. By the way, if you want to get easy macro-friendly recipes, please go and download our new book. It is our Team Via Body Macro-Friendly Recipe Guide. There are some amazing dishes in there and all very, very macro-friendly, healthy, easy. You don't have 45 ingredients listed. It's simple. Okay, so back to my compliance. I just had to stop this video. Someone was knocking at my door. Sorry, here we go. I'm trying to remember what I said. All right, I have 105% compliance to my protein. So I am so happy and proud of myself for this past week because I was really worried. Looking at my week 1 compliance to protein, I was like, oh my God, I've forgotten how to enjoy protein. And I was just like, But I have definitely made a more concerted effort. And of course, I'm back up to 131 this week, which is great. So I was a little over what I needed to be. But, that's not the worst thing in the world. If you're going to go over on a macro, it would be protein, that's for sure. And again, that would be because of its thermogenic effect of food. It obviously costs a lot more to break that one down. It doesn't mean that you can overeat on it by any stretch of the imagination. You can still gain body fat if you eat in excess of your caloric requirements with protein. So it's just if there is one that you were going to go over on accident, then it would be this one. You can see my sodium was on average about, looks like 700 milligrams higher than previous weeks. So I'm not really, trying to, have a set sodium target, but rather it's just something for me to be cognizant of because it will influence my weight on the scale. So it will help me determine whether or not, if I didn't lose weight 1 week or I maintained, for example, I might be able to say, well, had you had a lower sodium intake this week, you probably would have lost weight. So compared to the previous weeks or relative change. So the other thing I wanted to look at was my subjective scores for sleep, muscle soreness, hunger and fullness, food focus, and then my energy levels. So I think the first one, again, is just my energy levels have come down quite a bit. Now, I will say part of the reason I think that I'm feeling a little bit more under the weather this week in general is that even though my total sleep average is higher than last week, my sleep wake cycle shifted significantly this week. So there were a couple of nights where I was writing algorithms and doing stuff, I guess, for the new features for our app when it's launched. I wanted to start getting those things done. And I was up until 2:00. So normally I'm trying to get to bed by about midnight and then I'm up at 7 a.m. in the morning, 6:30 to 7. But this week I stayed up until 2, probably 2 nights of the week. I did make up for it by sleeping in a little bit later and starting my morning later. And on those mornings, I didn't get to train. You can see here Tuesday and Friday. These are the mornings that I didn't get any resistance training in. And I knew if I wanted to stay up late, I'm not going to be able to also train in the mornings. I have to get started on work. So even though my sleep was the same, that shifted by a couple of hours. Oh my gosh, I totally felt that. I was really, really tired this week, and you can see here my scores are down at 4.6. So my goal for this week is, if I'm going to do any additional work outside of my normal, coaching, meetings, content creation, all that stuff, that I need to make sure that I get into bed at a reasonable hour. Otherwise, I'm going to start to get sick or probably get injured. My muscle soreness was a little bit higher too this week, as I mentioned in conversation earlier. So I know that some of the potential weight changes that I'm seeing right now are probably also being influenced by just how sore I've been. So there's nothing I can do about that. I'm not going to train less, aggressively or, at the same intensity. That will continue. I just have to be mindful of the fact that it would be masking some of the weight loss that's probably taking place. And again, I can see it, like I only have to look at my body composition. I've got my abs back. I can see more lines everywhere, which is really good, but it's just not showing on the scale. Again, so let's have a look at my overall numbers for my training. So as I said earlier, my volume came down a little bit this week, but I know that that's not because I didn't get my work done. You can see if I switch over to my program here, everything is checked off. Here are my sums for the total session. You can see everything got completed. So it wasn't, a change in program or anything. It was just the exercises changing, which has an influence on your total volume. So again, this is where I think if people were chasing volume all the time, it would be easy to get disheartened or think that you're regressing, or sometimes maybe the opposite. You might have a perceived increase in training volume when in actual fact it hasn't been. So I think what is really important to be mindful of when you are training and you've got an intentional goal is that you keep the consistency with your effort and intensity. That proximity to failure is really, really important. And I've obviously talked about, in previous videos, frequency in training set number per muscle group per week. Those things are obviously very important too, but I know my program isn't changing. There's nothing about it that's changed. So within the context of this 6-week mesocycle, I know I've had a really good week. It's just different training locations. My overall energy expenditure went up. You can see from 2073 to 2111, and for the same program. So that's comforting. I know that I'm putting in a little bit more work with each week and more focus. That's going up. And then I also got my 2 sessions in on the bike, and that came in at 717, which is great. Very happy with that. It's a lot higher than the first week, and I know I was a lot more focused when I was doing those sessions too. I saved them for the end of the day, and I just find, a couple extra meals in the tank, a little bit more time moving around. I'm not as stiff and sore like when I wake up in the morning. So I think that my performance is a little bit better in the evenings, and I think the research would suggest that too. And then also my weekly caloric expenditure has gone up. And part of that is also I just did more tracked walking. So, for this 65-minute walk and this 42-minute walk, I just remembered to track it. So there's a little sneaky few extras in there. But I am happy because, look, my steps came up. So 75, 6,000, and then 79 this week. So again, I was just a little bit more mindful of my movement, and made sure that on the weekends I got a walk in. I probably should put something in here. I know I did a walk on Saturday, but anyways, I did do some more walking over the weekend, and it was probably 50 minutes. Don't know what the calories were. But I'm getting closer and closer to my goal. So this is the final part of my check-in. So I'm not changing my macros. I want to keep them right where they are. I just want to be really consistent with my training this week. I'm keeping that 60 minutes, aiming for 600 to 650. This past week I did a little bit higher, so if I exceed that, great, but I'm not shooting for more. For my resistance training sessions, I want to keep working on that same kind of volume. And then as far as the calorie expenditure, again, just using my watch, somewhere between 2 and 2,500. And then 8,000 steps would be wonderful, which I certainly aim to do this week. That's my little goal. So that's everything for my check-in this week. I'm also going to be doing a new series with a client that I am just starting to work with. She's going to be doing her very first IFBB wellness competition. So I am going to start a video series where I kind of set up somebody that's doing wellness, and maybe if there are any subtle differences in how I approach things with a client. So I'm really excited to do that series. So please, if you aren't subscribed to my channel, subscribe. Not only are you going to get all of my check-ins, you'll get client check-ins, and then obviously all of the educational content each week as well. Also, if you want to get access to all of the recipes that I talked about today from my meal prep this week, all of that's going to be listed in the description. But if you are looking for more regimented recipe guides, please go and grab my recipe guides. And if you would like to learn a little bit more about muscle hypertrophy, you can grab a copy of my new book, The Complete Exercise Guide to Muscle Hypertrophy. This has been by far our bestseller. It's got so much education in there. Obviously, it's completely riddled with research, which I think is really important to kind of support the claims that we talk about when we're discussing, fancy training techniques, things like blood flow restriction, rest pause or rest time recovery. There's a whole host of really great topics in that book that I think you'll find really valuable. And then, of course, you can also learn about all of the other products and services that we have. So if you guys have got questions, please let me know. Enjoy the recipes for this week. They're all going to be listed, and I am very excited to, start week 4. So wish me luck.